Hello, everyone. Welcome to your pre-lab video for the solubility product experiment in Chem 1220. Goal of lab this week is to use chemistry and the solubility product to separate mixtures of metals. So you'll be preparing solutions that have multiple metal ions in them, and then you'll be attempting to turn one into a solid metal salt, so you can separate it from whichever ion is still in solution. Right? So in part one of lab, you'll have both silver and lithium ions in a solution, and you will attempt to turn one of them to a solid so that it can be separated from the other. All right, so quickly, we have a lot of safety points to cover ahead of this week's lab because we've got lots of different hazards this week. First, you'll be using Bunsen burners, so you'll be working with open flames, which always requires caution. You'll be working with both strong acids and strong bases, which can damage your belongings as well as your skin. We'll also be working with heavy metals, which are toxic. And then lastly, the centrifuges that we're using have fast-moving spinning parts that we want to keep our hands away from. All right, so a few specific things. Silver nitrate, which we'll be using in this experiment, can stain your skin. Right? And so in addition to working with strong acids and bases, this is another reason to wear gloves this week. For waste disposal, it's very important that any silver containing waste, anything that has silver in it, ends up in the appropriately marked silver waste container, and that the rest of our heavy metals go into the heavy metal toxic waste container. In terms of safely operating a centrifuge, the one thing to remember is that centrifuges must be balanced before you start spinning, before you turn them on and they start spinning your samples around. Right? So if you're putting two test tubes into a centrifuge, they need to be on opposite sides of the centrifuge, like this bottom left panel. This configuration where you have two test tubes next to one another is not balanced and would be a problem to turn on the centrifuge with those in that position. Similarly, if you're putting 4 test tubes into the centrifuge, you want them, again, evenly distributed around the circle and not in a group of 3 and group of 1, as is shown here. Okay. Moving on to new techniques that you'll be using this week. The first is carrying out a flame test. So in a flame test, you take advantage of the heat of a flame to excite atoms of a given element and lead them to emit a distinctive color. Right? So here we've dipped this metal loop into solution that has lithium ion, and as this enters the flame, it emits a nice characteristic pink glow. Now, what's really important with flame tests is that you don't just leave the rod in the flame. Right? If you do that, you can see it burns bright yellow. And that's just the result of the wire itself glowing red hot, right? So that's not color from your sample. That's just color from trying to burn that metal loop. Right? So what you want to do is put the loop into the edge of the flame till you just get a little color. And if it starts to glow yellow or red, pull back and give it a second to cool off. Right? And so be patient with this, give it a few tries. You'll get a feel for getting just a little bit of color off the edge of the flame, and that's what we want to see. Very nice. Okay. Moving on to the last technique that we'll be covering today, and that is decanting a liquid. Right, so here you can see we have a test tube with a solid white precipitate at the bottom and a solution above it. Right, so to decant, we are pouring the liquid out of the test tube while leaving the solid in place. So with steady hands and a bit of patience, one can pour out all the liquid while leaving the solid behind in the bottom of the test tube. Okay? By doing this, you will separate whatever is in that precipitate from whichever metals you've kept in solution. That's all we have. We'll see you all in lab this week.